Why do you disagree with that logic? Why provoke the Russians now by extending NATO closer to them, which would imply that the West thought, that Russia was going to become a threat?
Good. First question is, why should they be provoked if we say an attack on Russia is an attack on the whole Atlantic community?
An attack on Russia?
An attack on Poland is an attack on the entire Atlantic region. I don't see why that should provoke them, especially since we could make military... We have, for example, in Eastern Germany, we have military arrangements whereby no non-German troops go beyond the Elbe. We could make similar arrangements for Poland, that no non-Polish troops will be stationed on Polish territory. So then so what we would be extending is a security guarantee that places Poland strictly into...
But why would we need to do that?
Because if we don't do this, we will create, as I've said before, two categories of borders in Europe. We're creating a no man's land, and because the reluctance to do that can only indicate that we are not...
Let's have the map up so everybody can follow this. Can you see this map? Where is the no man's land? Would it be...
It would be Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. What you have in yellow on this map would be the no man's land in which both Germany and Russia would try to influence. For example, Yeltsin, in his speech to the General Assembly at the UN, made 2 points. Point one was that anything east of that yellow shaded area was connected to Russia as blood brothers.
That's Belarus and
Ukraine, and strongly implied that no outside influence was permissible there. Then he said, beyond this, we should get used to open spaces. Open spaces means a kind of neutralism, and neutralism means that Russia has a veto over the disposition, over the political disposition of that area. And the result, I would fear, would be that these countries would be torn to make some kind of arrangements. I don't think the Russian situation will ever become a clear-cut military threat. After all, in the middle of the Cold War, people were arguing whether the Russians were threatening.
Well, let's get Jack Matlock's answer to that unless those countries that we just saw are included in NATO, there'll be it'll be a vacuum in which both Russia and Germany and others will want to have influence.
I really don't see that would be more likely to happen if they are not members of NATO than if they are members of NATO. We don't feel that it's necessary to have Austria or Switzerland or Sweden in NATO. They don't feel the necessity. That doesn't make the Russians or others the arbiters of their political decisions. I think that if Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovakia and Hungary, all of them can develop stronger economies and a sense of national strength, that's going to be a sizable deterrent to, you might say, to Russia competing there. So far as competing for influence, there'll be a certain competition for influence anyway. There is one other factor here that we seem to be forgetting, and we did, though it was not a legally binding assurance, we gave categorical assurances to Gorbachev back when the Soviet Union existed, that if a united Germany was able to stay in NATO, NATO would not be moved eastward. And, you know, I think that the current Russian government is very clear
So we would be, but that assurance was given to the Soviet Union.
That is right. It is not a legally binding, but it was, you might say, a geopolitical deal. And if we simply ignore it, then certainly if I were a Russian, it would be hard for me to interpret this, even though it may not be intended that way, and it is not, as anything less than an attempt to shut Russia off from Eastern Europe.
And that was a line that Yeltsin used today, that it would isolate Russia and sow the seeds of discord.
But here's a country that has 20,000 nuclear weapons. The possibility that Poland would start marching into Russia is zero. And I repeat, this is not, in terms of political architecture, conceived as a Cold War situation, because Russia can participate in the European Security Conference in all the political issues, but one has to keep in mind what a weak Russia has done in the last few months. When we were assembling forces against Iraq a few weeks ago, the Russian foreign minister appeared in Baghdad in a political demonstration that certainly in practice discouraged any American military move on Serbia. They have clearly taken traditional Russian positions, understandably so. But Russia thinks of itself as a major geopolitical player, which it has every right to do.
Would be, under what you propose, would we be extending the American nuclear umbrella eastwards to those countries if they became members, like we would guarantee that any attack on Poland might be met with a nuclear attack? Would we be stationing American troops further east? You mentioned in Poland you would give a guarantee that only be Polish troops, but in other countries, would you be moving American troops further east?
This would be subject to negotiation with the Soviets, with the Russians. I'm more concerned with establishing the principle of who belongs to the Atlantic Alliance than with all the military dispositions. I see no need to station American troops in any of the former Soviet satellites, nor is it conceivable, nor should we, station American nuclear weapons in any of the former satellites. And we could embody this in some sort of an arms control agreement or some other agreement with Russia. What we would do is to create a safety net that says we hope that political conditions will evolve, as Ambassador Matlock says, in which case this is irrelevant. If they don't, however, and we also are discouraging any historic temptations to start throwing their weight again.
And is your point, Ambassador Matlock, that to do this might provoke those historic temptations and inflame the nationalist feelings in Russia, which Yeltsin could not ignore?
This is the problem. It's not that you refrain from doing something because it will offend Russia. If Russia is doing something that we don't want it to do, we should offend them. That's not the problem, but you should need to take into account the impact in the internal politics of the other countries. And it will definitely, as things stand now, leave the impression in Russia that the West is cutting them off and moving the line closer to their border. Now, over time, we might be able to persuade them differently. During German reunification, we brought about nearly a 180-degree turn on several issues through diplomacy and through some changes in our own position. So, you know, perhaps that would happen. But now the impact would be very negative in Moscow, in Russian politics, and would not be a service to those who want democratic institutions.
Okay, I'm sorry, but have to thank you both and leave it there for now. Appreciate you joining us.